Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Happiness in Higher Ed podcast. This is going to be episode 12. This is episode 12. And my name is John Hill. My pronouns are he, him. And today I have Brent Taylor. So before we start this podcast, I'm going to read off our mission statement. So in a world that can be engulfed in darkness, we must shine bright and lead the change for a better future. As we continue to shape and challenge emerging adults' minds, it is also our duty to reflect and remember what makes us happy and why we continue to do the work that we do. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Brent Taylor. So Brent currently works at the University of Denver as a senior grants and contracts administrator in the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. Brent assists research faculty in submitting research grants and contract proposals, managing these projects once they've been received, and ensuring compliance throughout the performance period and closeout of the projects. Brent received his degree in business administration with a concentration in marketing in 2016 from CSU Monterey Bay and worked for CSUMB as a junior post-award specialist after graduating until December 2017 before moving to Denver. Brent's hobbies include hiking, playing guitar, attending concerts, working out, and getting to try new restaurants throughout the Denver area. Hiking and working out were truly lifesavers this past year. As the world begins to open back up, Brent looks forward to concerts and going out to eat more consistently once again. Brent currently resides in Denver, Colorado with his partner and fiance, Ava. I always said that wrong, just as a heads up. Always said that wrong.
Did you like how I spelt it Ayva?
I honestly appreciate that. I would have said it wrong and I would have felt bad.
Oh my gosh, buddy.
Another CSUMB grad and current employee of the University of Denver as well. So, Brent, would you like to add anything else?
My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am happy to be here.
Got you. Nice. Love it. All right, so we're just going to roll into the questions then. So, what was the reason you started to pursue a career in higher education?
It was kind of by accident, honestly. I started off as a student assistant at the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Center at Cal State Monterey Bay. Most of that center was funded by externally funded grants, so the McNair Scholars Program, HSI and STEM, et cetera. And basically these programs were designed to help facilitate student research for underrepresented groups of people in higher ed as well as first-gen students. My role there was kind of helping people book research trips, ensuring that they were getting paid for this funded research, and really just keeping track of budgets. And so that kind of like started my pivot from the marketing side, because I had a marketing concentration, and I was like, maybe finance is actually a little bit more interesting. Like, how can I do that in a higher ed setting? So I was working pretty closely with pro staff at the University Corporation at Monterey Bay, which is the 501c3 nonprofit foundation for CSUMB. And they had a post-award specialist position come open, which is basically ensuring compliance and kind of just like helping run these grants from the financial side after they've been awarded. And so that popped up. I applied. I didn't get it because I just was a fresh grad, didn't have a ton of experience, like just the professional experience side. And so fortunately enough, I think they liked me so much that they posted a junior post-award specialist position that they didn't require a ton of experience, but they wanted someone that they already kind of knew. So I got hired for that. And then it kind of just showed me how much universities need to pay attention to detail to ensure that they actually continue to receive this funding. Because you have the faculty and staff that are doing the actual research, and then you have the side of people making sure that they're not buying Hawaiian vacations with those research dollars.
I mean, if it happens, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, right. There were definitely some times where there were some conferences in Hawaii, and I was like, okay. But yeah, I think the main thing that I kind of started drawing from this and being like, okay, I actually could make a career out of this, kind of started with UROC in that, although I'm not participating in the research itself, it's rewarding knowing that my piece of ensuring that these grant projects are in compliance, both ethically and financially, are within the funders' guidelines, which actually allows them to continue to do the research. I don't think I really understood how important it was when I was at URock until I got to UCorp. So it definitely kind of like gives me the reminder of like, why do I do this job? And I think back to like what I saw students be able to do at URock, because without these grants, they would like a lot of these students wouldn't be able to do the things they want to do. So yeah.
Got you. Okay. So it's kind of just one of those things that it kind of happened. It wasn't something you were looking for, but it kind of just like the opportunity arose and you just took it.
Exactly. I actually, so weirdly enough, just before I graduated, I had like a quote unquote marketing job set up in San Jose.
Mhm.
And it was basically, you know, I kind of like kept digging into it even after I accepted the offer. And I'm like, this seems like, and it basically was a professional pyramid scheme in San Jose. And it was going to be like a base income that was below minimum wage. And then it's like, oh yeah, but like your commission's going to help pay for all of this.
In San
And
Jose.
it was,
In
yeah,
San Jose.
and it basically was like going to be selling AT&T at Costco, which I'm not going to fault that as a career choice. I just realized that was not for me. And fortunately enough, I had the resources to be able to make this other side work. And from there, I've been able to make a career out of it. So
Got you.
pretty happy with that.
I will say I probably wouldn't have bought in that AT&T from you at Costco, but you would have done a good job. I'm just saying.
It's
but
brutal. I mean, sales. It is what it, like you said, it is what it is.
Got you. But well, thank you. So on to the next question. So what makes you happy in thinking about one thing from higher ed and then one personal thing?
Well, in higher ed, I would say I work with a lot of people that are willing to go above and beyond to actually make sure that somebody, like if somebody has something that needs to be done or they're looking to get a question answered, it gets answered. Nobody wants the runaround. And I feel like, and I think what I've noticed from working in higher ed is you don't get the runaround that often. Mm-hmm. And you have these people that are working in accounts, accounts payable, for example, that are trying to help with like travel reimbursement checks that end up helping you with something that's payroll related. And that's not their job, but they're like, we know how important it is for people to actually get the answer like they need. Oh, excuse me. And they end up helping get it. So it makes when you get the runaround more noticeable, and it makes it that much worse. So I think that's something in higher ed that, I mean, I've been fortunate enough that I work with all these people that are willing to go above and beyond. And then as far as my personal life, I would say seeing people I care about go out of their comfort zone to achieve something I didn't know that they could. And I think a simpler way of saying that is I love watching people grow mentally, emotionally, and physically. Like whether it be an athletic achievement, like my coworker running an Ironman, or seeing people try to like start seeing like my guy friends, especially trying to like find ways to start undefining what masculinity means and like what it means to be a man. Really that makes me truly happy. Got you.
So it's like that personal growth. And I think that like looking back on this past year and a half, 16, 17, however long it's been, March 2020, I guess is the best way to put it. I think that's such a beneficial thing to see. And like either you have seen the growth or you've seen it like at least start a little bit in most individuals. So I think that, whether you're I wouldn't say in a state of denial, but if you were kind of like thinking of like, well, this could just be a quick thing, and now we're this far into the pandemic. I think it's nice to see some personal growth. And we had so much time, honestly. Like I know that we talked about that before, of like having more time to do things. Definitely had a lot more time to do that this time around. So, but nice. All right, so on to the next question. So, what keeps you resilient in some of the challenges you've faced? So, thinking about like budget cuts, stress in the pandemic, etc. You move from California to Colorado, so you got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, no, true. I don't know. I think it's really just the ability to step back and think about what matters. It's kind of a basic way to look at things. But I feel like there were times during the pandemic where I was working more and more and more, like way more than I ever had before, which is like, capitalism would say that's great. My mental health would probably say it's not great.
Mhm.
So I think just finding ways to say, okay, we're turning off the computer at this time, and we're not going to think about this for the rest of the day. And I think that definitely helped a lot. Also, the ability to, I don't know, the stepping back thing is the main aspect of it. I think another thing that that's kind of started to give me resilience is just giving grace to people more often.
Mhm.
I feel like, especially during this last year and a half, we expected people to perform like nothing was happening, like nothing wrong, nothing bad was happening. And, going through this, a global pandemic, and also going through um, this, I mean, we knew racism existed for a long time, but this racial awakening, um, it's been a rough year.
Mhm.
And just giving people the space to, because you don't know what other people are dealing with. Um, and just, I feel like if we all had a little bit more empathy,
Mhm.
uh, things things would get better. You would hope so. And I think that's kind of been a motto the last year and a half, is just more empathy.
Got you. So the first part that you were talking about sounded like creating boundaries and
Yeah.
like how that became such an important piece of just work, like of you at this point.
Hmm.
Do you think that boundaries are going to be, as we start to move back into, I guess, the quote unquote normalcy of
Yeah.
things, do you think that those boundaries are going to be people are going to try to push those boundaries a little bit, or do we think that you're going to be able to like firmly hold those boundaries that you've established?
I think both.
Okay.
Um, we like, even just this, like the remote work aspect of it all. Just like there's definitely been like negotiation. Like at my university and other universities, like what is the new normal? Like, is that 3 days in the office? Is that 4 days in the office? And I think I'm seeing more employees be willing to voice their concerns more than they ever had before. Where it's like we're not just taking orders anymore. Like I think a lot of people have learned to vouch for themselves. And
Mhm.
I think that was one positive thing that came from all of this, where it's like, if you want me to work to my full ability, like I'm willing to work with you to figure out something for me and to also benefit you, you know? So
Got you.
I think it's give and take, unfortunately.
Got you. I mean, no, I think it is. I think it is one of those things. And I think that now, like what you had just mentioned, is that it's more of a conversation that you can have.
Hmm.
That you can still get everything that's on your plate done at home. Having that ability to say, I don't know what time you get off, but like let's say like 5 o'clock, that you're like, at 5 o'clock, I am going to turn my computer off. I'm going to walk out of my office or leave this space that I'm in doing this work, and I'm going to live my life, outside of the office. You know.
Exactly. And there's obviously, like, I think one of the best things that I think has come from it too is like just the concept of flex time, where it's like like nobody's life like is the same as the other. So it's like you have people, like, people with kids, that it's hard for them to work during the day, because what if they can't afford childcare?
Hmm.
And so they end up working after their kids go to bed. Like I think that's, like, I had never even thought of that as an option. And it's like their job is getting done, and mind you, they also have another job, which is taking care of their kids.
Hmm.
It's wild. It's it's wild to me. I can't even
Yeah.
imagine that.
And you talked about the racial injustice, that like that awakening that
Yeah.
happened last summer,
Yeah.
and like even just that piece of like the inequality of it, and like
Mm-hmm.
how we thought we saw the lines that
Mm,
like with working at home, like how the inequality is also there as well. Like there's equality in every single ism, and that was one of like the key ones that affected a lot of individuals, is like, there's so much grace right now of like working from home, spending time with the kids and things like that, and then like going back to that, like we talked about, that quote unquote normal. How is that going to impact everything? Some places are opening up, some places aren't opening up. So like if your daycare center isn't opening up, then it kind of like makes it a challenge for you to make sure that you can get your work done, that typical 8 to 5. But like you had mentioned, that flex time is so key and
yep.
so beneficial to individuals. So
Exactly.
Gotcha. So on the next question, what are some of the ways that you practice self-care to stay on your A game?
I kind of broke this down into three categories. The first one's physical well-being. I usually try to work out 5 days a week. That's with weights and also getting 3 miles a day, just walking. And I think that's like been one of the things about the pandemic that I'm truly grateful for, is having the ability to like get up at like 7 o'clock, which is awesome. Or like maybe not the pandemic, it's the working from home aspect. A better way to put it. Getting up at 7 and being able to like go on a walk through. We have this really, really nice neighborhood called Country Club. That's just like really, really wide streets, like really big houses that are kind of nice to look at, old Victorians. And during the fall, it's wonderful to walk through, but like that's kind of become like my standard 3 miles every day there. I end up lifting weights later in the day. And that's kind of just been the routine. And then the other aspect of that physical well-being is hiking every weekend. I think I kind of mentioned like that was one of the big things that helped us get through this last year and a half, is like getting outside. And living in Colorado, I didn't really feel like we had an excuse not to do that anymore.
It's very true. Very true.
Like it feels weird not hiking on the weekend anymore. So that's been wonderful. I think the second aspect of self-care is emotional and mental well-being. I've read more in the last year and a half than I think I read like in the 4 years after college combined. I just like didn't read that much. And then finding kind of a balance between that reading, where it's like I've been alternating between nonfiction and a novel. And usually that nonfiction is social justice oriented. So it's very like, it really pushes you into out of your comfort zone, makes you try to think about things in a different way. And then I end up reading a book about Star Wars. Like it's very much like you got to find a balance. You can't burn yourself out. And I think that was definitely something like even after George Floyd was killed, I read like 3 racial injustice books in a row. And it was very much like what they said, is like it was fatigue. So finding a balance between like staying up to date and staying relevant and just fun time, I guess you can say. Like unfortunately, that is a privilege that a lot of white people have. That I definitely acknowledge that it exists. And then I think the last part is social well-being. Keeping touch with friends and family. I think FaceTime was truly a savior this last year. It was pretty wild. I got to go back to my hometown and near Sacramento at the beginning of July, and it was the first time I had seen my nephew since he was like 6 months old, and now he's almost 2. So it's like it was going from this baby to this little boy.
Yeah.
And it was wild. And I knew that I had missed my family, and I don't think I realized how much I needed that until I actually went home, because I didn't see them for any of the holidays. And that's usually a big time of the year that we end up seeing each other, and that sucked, frankly.
Yeah.
That was definitely the most difficult aspect of the pandemic for me. I mean, we're still in it, obviously, so it's going to continue to be hard. I am definitely acknowledge and well aware that many others have had much worse. Personally, for me, I'm grateful that was the worst for me.
Got you. No, that totally makes sense. That definitely makes sense. Because I think that like it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, that like we all are going through different things, and I think that the pandemic just capitalized on some of those things, but then also just you still saw that there's still all these other things that other individuals are facing, and like it brings back to that privilege point. And I think too, you had mentioned this before about like giving grace to other individuals when you're like in different situations, but also giving yourself a lot of grace too. I think that as much as you're giving it out, you need to give it to yourself. And I think that what you had talked about is kind of like giving yourself the time and space that you need, talking about like your physical aspect of it, and then as well as the emotional, and then the social aspect. So you found out, I personally found out a lot about myself in this past throughout the pandemic. And I think it was so key, because like it was just at a certain point where like everything had kind of been on autopilot, and like now all of a sudden you have to like figure it out, in a sense. But
I think it emphasized a lot of where other people stand in this world, but it also emphasized even more where you stand in this world. It definitely created a lot of self-awareness. I totally agree with you on that. Yeah.
So the last question that I have for you is, what is one piece of advice you live by in your practice?
All right, this is going to be corny.
Okay.
So it's a bit cliche, but I think it's follow your heart and you'll never go wrong. That's what it was. Yeah, it's like follow your heart and you'll never go wrong. My grandfather actually shared this with me in the last couple of days before he passed away, back in September, October of 2017. So it was like as I was like starting to think about possibly moving to Denver. This was also about a year and a half into Ava and I doing long distance, where I was living in Monterey and Ava was in Ventura. It's like we were, in the same state in California, but like you're from Southern California, right? Like it's not close.
No, it's not.
So yeah, distance was rough, and I had kind of been wrestling with this idea of like moving to another state, and like it would be good, like, and it was kind of like, it would be good to advance my career. Like there were these positions that were opening up, and I was like, that could work. And then also Ava was there. And let's be real, Ava was priority number one here. And I remember kind of like talking to my grandfather about this, like one of the few times that he was actually kind of like lucid those last few days. And he was just like, follow your heart and you'll never go wrong. And that's the way that I choose to remember him. And in reality, this ended up being a great idea. And I think I've discovered a lot about myself. Ava and my relationship has strengthened that much more. It was probably the best decision I ever made for myself in my life. So follow your heart.
Got you. Nice. And I appreciate you. And thank you for sharing that story. Because that's awesome. And yeah, and I was going to say something, and now I have no idea what I was going to say. No, I think that's an awesome story, and no, and like, yes, now I got it. We're good. Follow-up question to this, and I know you had mentioned of moving to Colorado to advance your career. Do you think that moving to Colorado was, if not one of the best decisions you've ever made?
Yeah, hands down. It was because I think about just like growing up with, okay, where was I going to go to high school? It was I ended up going to like a private all guys Catholic school in Sacramento. And that was kind of like my mom's decision. And then when we decision, this was probably
you broke up a little bit on that last part. Sorry.
Oh, so no, I said like, and then like where I ended up going to college, like I was fortunate enough to go to college. My mom kind of made that decision of where I was going to go. I'm grateful that I ended up going to CSUMB. But then even kind of like the job, like that was kind of like, I was like, okay, like this is like when I'm kind of starting to realize I'm an adult. And then moving to Denver was the most drastic thing I think I've ever done. But it was definitely the most satisfying thing I've ever done.
Got you. And yeah, you met me at CSUMB. Not that was, but
I know. I kind of thought about that. I was like, we were like kind of like living together for 6 months, and I was like, oh my god, who am I going to live with now when I go to Denver?
No, because I remember that conversation where I knew that we were at the what is even just the going to different places and like hearing how they call them different things, like rec center, like all that. Like I don't even know what CSUMB's was, but
it's first of all, it's the Otter Sports Center. Let's remember that.
Center. Okay. Okay, nothing against CSUMB, but I've been in better or different facilities. I'll say different facilities. So,
duh, like, come on, like, obviously, like, I know. Even coming to DU's like rec center, I was like, oh, okay, this is what it was.
Yep, I having more than 5 platforms, and it's a different experience, and having different equipment. Once again, I appreciate my 4 years at CSUMB. They taught me so much. But I remember that conversation of you were just like, oh yeah, like I'm moving to Denver, and I was like, man, like we won't like this was like 4 months that we lifted together, and then you're just piecing out. And like 2 of those months I was just like, I kind of know who he is, I don't really know who he is, but then all of a sudden it was like, hey, can you spot me? And then just like every bro conversation in the gym, that's how it started.
It's true.
That is how it started.
It's fair. Unfortunately, like, unfortunately that's how a lot of male relationships start, and that's the entry point, and eventually they grow into something else. So
that's very true. And and at that point, and thankfully that you sent this bio to me, because I still would have said Ava's name wrong, even though we had that time together and chatted and stuff. I feel bad. I feel bad.
It's fine. I even told Ava, I was like, I spelt your name. Like, I put your name, and then like I put the pronunciation. She was like, oh my God, that's so nice. I was like, hell yeah.
I would have felt terrible, because I would have just been like a continuous, like, I think I've only ever really interacted with Ava one time, and that was because Sandra had asked someone in the office, and when I say someone, it was only one of the dudes in the office that could like use bolt cutters, or that was strong enough to use bolt cutters, because we had to go all the lockers for the bikes for that summer.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was a hockey lock, and I was like a hockey puck lock, and I was like, there's just no way this is happening. And I literally, like a 10-minute conversation, and then like she's like, oh yeah, I'm going to grad school, and I was like, oh, super cool. And that was really it.
That's funny.
So, but yeah, and then you moved to Denver, but here we are.
Yeah.
So, but then, being in a virtual environment, I got to ask you to do this, and you said yes. So I appreciate you for that. So
yeah, of course. I'm stoked that you're doing this in general. I kind of had thought about it. I was like, it's odd that there are not many, like, there are higher ed podcasts, but like I've tried to listen to them and they're not that interesting. Like I like, they are interesting, but it's also like, I feel like my job is such a niche aspect of higher ed, where it's like, I don't work with students. I work with like faculty and research staff, and we don't have a ton of meetings. It's mostly done over email. I mean, that's one aspect of this job, like during the last year and a half, is we were able to pivot remotely pretty easily. Like, we don't have to go through programming like you were doing in-person programming, which is wild. So this is awesome. And I think that this podcast definitely sheds a light on, working in higher ed is not A, just teaching, and B, constantly working with students. Like, there's so much more. So I'm grateful that you're doing this, John.
Yeah, and no, and I mentioned this before you even hit record, is that I wanted to bring you on here because we had those 4 months together, but also because it's a different aspect. I think that sometimes we get caught up in that it's student affairs and academic affairs, but there's also other pieces that they're a part of an institution, but don't really necessarily don't live on either side of the fence. They're kind of like in the middle. So, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you for that. So, but yeah, so thank you once again for being here and doing this podcast. And don't forget to like and subscribe to YouTube, as well as listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcast. So, but I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and see you next time.